Rehoboam lived in Jerusalem and built up towns for defense in Judah: Bethlehem, Etam, Tekoa, Beth-zur, Socoh, Adullam, Gath, Mareshah, Ziph, Adoraim, Lachish, Azekah, Zorah, Ajalon, and Hebron. These were fortified cities in Judah and Benjamin.
In all the excavations of Lachish, there were no signs of a fortified city during Rehoboam's day. Until now. Speaking at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem's Archaeology Conference, Professor Yossi Garfinkel, head of the university's Institute of Archaeology, described the discovery of a previously unknown wall. Based on carbon dating of all of pits found there, the wall dates exactly to Rehoboam's time. In the story of Jesus and the two disciples on the road to Emmaus in Luke 24:13-34, the location of Emmaus is described as 60 Roman stadia from Jerusalem, which translates to 7 miles. For centuries, scholars have tried to pin down the location of Emmaus. Sites at various distances west of Jerusalem have been proposed, but without archaeological evidence. Israeli archaeologist Israel Finkelstein, known as a biblical minimalist and Bible critic, offered this new identification based on the Hellenistic-era fortifications his excavation uncovered at Kiriath Yearim. He notes there are 2 lists of Hellenistic fortified towns around Jerusalem from the ancient historian Josephus and in 1 Maccabees 9:50. Both of them included Emmaus. Kiriath Yearim is 7 miles from Jerusalem. Kiriath Yearim is mentioned numerous times in the Old Testament, most famously as the place where the Ark of the Covenant was.
In this study, we sequenced the genomes of people that lived around 3,000 years ago in the Philistine city of Ashkelon.
The genetic results that we're announcing today are the result of decades of hard archaeological research. In the 13th and 12th century, empires collapsed. Indeed, much of civilization collapsed. And when people woke up 100 years later, the world was very different. One of the groups that people noticed 100 years later were the Philistines. The Philistines appear in the Hebrew Bible as one of the great enemies of the Israelites. But where did they come from?
Their DNA revealed their origins in a way that we couldn't get to before.
We detected a substantial proportion of their ancestry was actually derived from a European population. This means that the ancestors of these Philistines must have traveled across the Mediterranean and reached Ashkelon sometime during the end of the Bronze Age or the beginning of the Iron Age.
From the early 20th century, people noted that some of the styles of pottery that were found at some of the Philistine cities, according to the Hebrew Bible, seemed to match styles of pottery that came from Greece in earlier eras.
It's not just the objects of antiquity, but it's the people that we wanted to get to figure out who were these people, where did they come from, what were they like, what was their religion, their history, their culture.
So I think what our research here is showing is that we are now able to move from prehistoric times into historical times and see if some of the historical events that have been described in early historical texts or even religious texts like the Bible, if indeed we find also evidence based on genetic research, if some of those shifts or changes or migrations of people indeed occurred. What we also find, which is quite interesting, is that at a later stage, in the later Iron Age, this genetic signature seems to disappear again. In the later Iron Age, the people that lived there, which is in about 800 BC, they look genetically again like the people that lived there in the Bronze Age before. So we see this incursion of people coming with the time of the Philistines, but then this genetic signature seems to disappear again.
The findings of this study are a good example of how DNA can be a powerful tool to record history and answer historical questions. On the other hand, it reminds us that culture or ethnicity don't necessarily equal the genetic makeup of the same groups.
A recently translated inscription on a stone altar discovered in the ancient city of Iddarath in Jordan may reference the rebellion of Mesha, king of Moab, described in 2 Kings 3. The 2,800-year-old round, stone altar was discovered in 2010 in a Moabite sanctuary. A translation of the inscription on the altar was recently published in the journal Levant. The altar bears two inscriptions, one that records quantities of bronze, likely looted from the conquered city, that were presented as an offering, and the other describes Iddarath as the desolate city, and 4,000 foreign men, who were scattered and abandoned in great number. Both the inscription and the archaeological context, in which the altar was found, date to the late 9th or early 8th century BC. The importance of the inscribed altar, and its connection to the battle described in 2 Kings 3, lies in the fact that the Moabite stone Mesha stele records how the king of Moab conquered the Israelite city of Iddarath during the rebellion. It states, "Now the people of Gad had dwelt in the region of Ashtro for a long time, and the king of Israel built a target for them. But I fought against the city and I took it, and I killed all the people, and the city was a satiation for Chemosh and for Moab." The researchers conclude that the altar was placed in a Moabite sanctuary at Iddarath to commemorate this event. If this interpretation is correct, it would confirm that the Moabites succeeded in conquering Iddarath during Mesha's rebellion. The inscription also demonstrates that 2,800 years ago, the Moabites had skilled scribes and used their own script. A rare, well-preserved staircase belonging to a 3,500-year-old palace has been uncovered at the Tel Hatzor archaeological site. The palace is believed to have been destroyed in the fire that ravaged Canaanite Hatzor, which is depicted in the Bible, as part of the conquest of Israel in Joshua chapter 11 verses 10 to 13.
שלום אלי.
שלום רעות.
אנחנו נמצאים בגן לאומי עמק צורים, בסינון העפר מחפירות עיר דוד וירושלים הקדומה, ואתה מחזיק עכשיו ביד ממצא שהתגלה ממש לאחרונה כאן בסינון העפר מחפירות עיר דוד.
כן, אנחנו מחזיקים פה בטביעת חותם בולה ששימשה לחתימת מסמכים בתקופת בית ראשון. אנחנו מדברים פה על המאה השביעית לפני הספירה, תקופת ממלכת יהודה. אנחנו מדברים על חפץ שנמצא בחפירות של עיר דוד, מתחת לקשת רובינסון. יש על הבול הזו כתובת, והכתובת היא לאדוניהו אשר על הבית.
מה המשמעות של התפקיד הזה, אשר על הבית?
אשר על הבית זה השר הבכיר ביותר בממלכת יהודה. זה השר הכי מקורב למלך.
גם השם אדוניהו הוא שם מעניין, נכון? זה שם שמופיע בתנ"ך.
כן, הוא מופיע בקשר לשלוש דמויות שאנחנו מכירים בתנ"ך. המפורסם ביותר זה אדוניהו, הבן של דוד.
ואנחנו יודעים שלפני 150 שנה מתגלה כתובת ממש דומה לכתובת הזו במערת קבורה בהר הזיתים.
כן, אנחנו מדברים על כתובת מהמאה השביעית לפני הספירה. בכתובת כתוב יהוא. כלומר, אין לנו את כל השם שנקבע, הוא נמחק, נהרס, אבל אנחנו מכירים שהתואר שלו היה אשר על הבית. ואשר על הבית זה התואר של אדוניהו, אשר על הבית. כאשר אנחנו מדברים על אותה תקופה, על המאה השביעית לפני הספירה, האם זה האדם שנקבר בקבר הזה, אנחנו לא יודעים.
אבל זו אותה תקופה, אותו מרחב?
זה אותה תקופה, אותו מרחב, אותו אזור, ירושלים, תקופת בית ראשון, מאה השביעית לפני הספירה, סימן שאלה.
תתאר לי מה זה עושה לך עכשיו כשאתה מחזיק כזה נמצא ביד?
אחרי 2,600 שנה, אתה בא ומחזיק את הבולה הזו ששימשה חתימת מכתב שנשלח לפני 2,600 שנה על ידי השר הבכיר ביותר בממלכה. זה משהו מדהים, מחסיר פעימה בלב.
Standing here in the City of David National Park, and we're looking at excavations that the Israel Antiquities Authority has been conducting here for the past 4 months. Behind me you can see the destruction layers of 586 BC, the Babylonian destruction of the first temple city of Jerusalem. You can see here we have jars that were smashed in this room, and covered over by layers of destruction, of charcoal burnt. And what we've been doing here is exposing this layer in order to understand better the days leading up to and the actual event of the destruction. Traditionally, the area that we're standing in was thought of being sort of outside the city walls. About almost 60 years ago, Kathleen Kenyon exposed parts of what have been understood as the city walls of Jerusalem of the 7th century BCE. So this was sort of thought of as an external area without settlement. And here we've exposed a row of buildings. We're not sure exactly what their function is yet, but that's part of what we're trying to understand, that's outside that line of city wall. And so are we outside the city? Are we excavating an external quarter? Are these domestic buildings? Another interesting thing is that while behind me we have a very, very clear destruction level showing burnt signs, and you can see all the black sort of marks. Those are pieces of charcoal which burnt and collapsed in the room. Buildings dating of the same period just to the south of us in this excavation don't show signs of destruction. So it seems like not all the buildings were destroyed in a single event, but maybe specific buildings were destroyed and other buildings were then abandoned and left.
We are on the northern shore of the Kinneret Lake, Sea of Galilee, a site called in Hebrew Beit Habek. This site was known since the end of the 19th century as an ancient site and one of the three candidates to identify Bethsaida. A bathhouse is something that leads us to the understanding that we are within some kind of a city. Though the dig here is very small, it immediately hinted us to suggest that we discovered the city of Julias. Now, what is the city of Julias? We were talking about Bethsaida. Josephus Flavius, the Jewish historian in the 1st century, tells us that King Philip, the son of Herod the Great, who ruled from here to the Golan, towards Damascus, decided to upgrade the village of Bethsaida and to make it a polis by the name of Julias. There is a document from a visitor from the end of the 7th century AD, a Christian pilgrim, who says that after he left Capernaum, he arrived to Bethsaida, and there is a church for the apostles Peter and Andrew. So for the Christians in the 6th, 7th, 8th century, it was still called Bethsaida. But if we will succeed in proving scientifically that this is the place of Julias, therefore Bethsaida, I think it can be developed into an interesting site for people who are interested in being in the place where the apostles lived.
Three altar horns were discovered during this year's excavations at Shiloh, Israel, led by the Associates for Biblical Research. Horn 1, 38 cm long and 23.5 cm wide, comprise part of an early Roman wall. Horn 2, 18 cm long and 12.5 cm wide, lay about 3 meters to the southwest. Horn 3, 38 cm long and 20 cm wide, emerged from a destruction matrix in an adjacent square. The elevation of horns 1 and 2 was virtually identical, but the elevation of horn 3 measured 1 meter lower. All three horns came from the general area of a monumental Iron Age building which orients east-west. These objects are evidence that the Israelites worshipped the Lord at Shiloh, the location of the Israelite tabernacle for over 300 years as described in Scripture.
I'm standing in the Givati car park excavations that are being run by the Israeli Antiquity Authority and Tel Aviv University in the National Park of the City of David. And I'm holding in my hand a seal with ancient Hebrew letters mentioning the name of Akar ben Mataniyahu. And I'm standing in the room where this seal was actually found on the floor in the destruction of Jerusalem in 586 BCE. It's not a coincidence that this building and the seal that was found in it are located here. We are actually in a building that is built on the slopes of the City of David Ridge towards the Central Valley. From somewhere in the 8th century BCE, this becomes a central park of the city.
I'm standing right now in one of the rooms of a very large structure. A structure that was built somewhere in the late 8th or 7th century BCE and was destroyed in a big fire, most probably in 586 BCE during the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem. The room was preserved and it was filled with the destruction, most probably of the second floor above it. What you can see behind me, for example, stones from the walls of the second store, burnt beams, and pottery vessels that was probably in the house when it was destroyed. The size of this structure, the ashlar stones from which it was built, and other remains that were found within it indicate that this house was not a regular dwelling. This was probably the house of a very rich person, maybe an officer or someone from the administration of Jerusalem. One of the most special finds that were found right here in this room is a small bulla.
So this is the bulla of one Natan Melech, servant of the king. And since he is not mentioned with his last name, only first name, we can understand that he was a pretty famous person here in Jerusalem during the mid-7th century, time of King Josiah. Now this name, Natan Melech, is mentioned in the Bible only once, in the second book of Kings, where he is mentioned as an official of King Josiah, in a story about the famous religious reforms of King Josiah, who removed the horses that the former kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun. The $1 million question is, am I holding in my hand the bulla of the same Natan Melech who is mentioned in the Bible? Well, I can never say that for certain, but what I can say is that there is an overlap in three things. First, the name Natan Melech, which is rare. Second, the period. We're talking about the mid-7th century BCE, King Josiah. And third, the fact that we have the title. So Natan Melech was someone who was close to the king.